What's up, guys? Welcome out to another episode of the Gametime Guru podcast brought to you by Nation's Best Football. Shout out to them for sponsoring today's show. And I want to also give a shout out to Barclay and Hill, which is my local barber here in the Treasure Valley of Idaho. If you need a good barber, go check out Barclay and Hill. Check out the logo here on my hat. I love them, and I want to give them a shout out. Guys, I'm bringing back on Mike Zanetti as we're talking college football. We had the first round of the college football playoff, all the things that took place, and now we're getting ready for the quarterfinal matchups. Today, we're breaking it all down, getting Mike's takes and my takes. What's interesting is you're going to see a couple of things that have shifted in our mindset from a couple of weeks ago when we had Mike on the show before the season ended, and now who we expect to be in the national championship. Do you agree, disagree? Make sure you stay tuned for the entire episode to see where you are on the same page with us and where you might not be. So we would love to hear from you guys down in the comments as well. So if you're watching it on YouTube, which I encourage you guys to do, make sure to leave us a comment down below. But if you're listening to it on your Apple Podcast or Spotify or whatever audio platform that you're on, hit that subscribe button, give us a follow, and tune in because this is the Gametime Guru. So
what time is it? Game time!
This is the Gametime Guru podcast, where I interview sports figures from all over the world to help deliver a panoramic view on sports. So whether you're a former athlete, one of the crazies, or simply a casual sports fan, this is the perfect show for you as we peel back the curtains and learn from our guests every single week. I'm your host, Shane Larson, and I'm helping you see sports through a different lens. What's good, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Gametime Guru podcast. And you guys heard in the introduction, we're stoked to bring back on Mike Zanetti as we're going to be breaking down the college football playoffs. Man, we're going to the quarterfinals this next week. We got some good games coming up. We want to break down some of the first games, a semi-lackluster first round, so to speak, but we'll kind of touch base on that, touch base on some of the Heisman Trophy and award show stuff, and then we'll get into the quarterfinals here in just a second. I want to shout out real quick, though, Nation's Best Football. Shout out to Bob Smith and what he's built over at Nation's Best. He's the reason that Mike and I are able to connect. He connected the two of us through his platform, and I'm grateful for him and his partnership since 2018. And so we want to shout out Nation's Best. Go give them a follow. I also want to shout out Barclay and Hill. It's a local barbershop here in the Treasure Valley of Idaho. Shout out to Barclay and Hill. Got him right here representing the barbershop. Been going to Trevor Hill for quite some time now as my barber, and couldn't be more thankful for his work that he puts in the support he's shown the podcast. So, Mike, you're up in your hometown now in Jersey for the Christmas break, from school and whatnot. A little colder weather, but you're back on the podcast. How are you doing, man?
It's going well. Yeah, everything's doing really well. Good to be back and just keep your grind going.
Heck yeah, man. It's good to have you back, brother. So last time, man, we were on the podcast last month chatting about what we were expecting for the final couple weeks of the season, and then going into the Heisman Awards and so forth. So first and foremost, I mean, we were talking about the Heisman. Obviously, Hunter takes home the Heisman. We chatted about Ashton Jeanty with me being a Boise State alum and whatnot, what my thoughts were. I am curious, man, after it's all said and done, the dust has settled, so to speak. What are your thoughts on the Heisman? Did the right man win the award?
It's hard to say because you look at it and it was one of the closest Heisman races. It dates back to 2012, where the last actual race in terms of the votes. But just in general, I would have given it to Jeanty. I feel like the fan favorite, that was their guy. They loved the spark and energy he brought. But at the same time, Travis Hunter, the two-way player that he is, that's the reason he got it. And then being as dominant as he is on both sides of the ball, it's hard to kind of argue it, but I love Jeanty and what he stood for this season. Fourth in terms of single rushing yards in a single season.
100%. I actually agree with you on that. I'm not like this huge Jeanty homer from being from Boise. I agree. Like, Hunter is right. I mean, it was a close race. Like, it's not like one blew the other one out or anything of that nature. But I do think what's crazy to me, Mike, is when I'm around some college football fans, especially here in the area, that are just completely just flabbergasted. Oh, I can't believe this is blasphemous. I'm like, dude, are you kidding me? It should be close. Like, it should be close. I'm not even mad because it's close. Like, it should have been close. They're acting like Hunter shouldn't even have stood a chance just because he's not even a top player at each position. Like, he's not number one at either one of the positions. I'm like, yeah, but he's like a top 5 or top 10 in each position. That's pretty crazy if you really think about it. Like, nobody does that, So
I would say if he was playing one position, like if he was just a cornerback or just a wide receiver, it would have went to Jeanty. But because he plays both sides, that's the reason.
100%, man. And yeah, there's something to be said about that. Everyone's like, the snap count doesn't matter. I'm like, well, it kind of does in a sense. Like there's a reason nobody else does it. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know how else to say it, but that. So I'm with you on that. Also with Colorado, I want your thoughts on Colorado as we wrap up this whole like season of Shedeur Sanders and this Travis Hunter era of football over with Colorado. They're going to be playing full strength against BYU and in the bowl game this weekend because Dion wanted to make sure that they got taken care of. After watching them all season, Mike, what are your thoughts on Colorado and what the body of work they put together? Are you a Dion fan? Are you not a Dion fan? Do you think they've shown some light or what?
It's tough to say because you look at the season that they had. I don't know if the expectations were there for what the team they were last year. They definitely improved. A bowl game, I think, was their goal, or at least the goal of what the public has set for them from what I've seen. And they did what they were supposed to. They were actually, I think, better than what people give them credit for in terms of like a preseason evaluation. But yeah, I think honestly for me, I love what happened this year. Travis Hunter went ballistic. We saw it all year. Shedeur is probably going to be a top pick in this year's draft. Do I agree with it? We'll see. The quarterback selection is tough as it is. But going into this game versus BYU, I don't know if BYU can stay in it with the offensive firepower that Colorado has, but we'll just have to see how it goes. And honestly, with the way the big kind of 12 is worked out, it's like I wouldn't be surprised if it was a blowout. Okay.
No, that's interesting. I got a couple of friends of mine, massive BYU fans, a couple of friends of mine that are former BYU football players too. And they're like all gung-ho about it. I'm like, I kind of agree with you too. I'm like, I could actually see it being 20 plus points quick early into the game. It depends. They're like, oh no, BYU's defense is so strong. And I guess we'll see. They have a good defensive front, good front seven, I should say. But yeah, that only helps so much when you've got like 2 or 3 NFL caliber receivers out in space. Right. So, and a quarterback that can at least get him the ball. You know what's funny, Mike, as we're on that topic of Colorado, I guess for me, I look back at the whole body of work and, you know, sure, they lost games that you're not supposed to lose. That happens to a lot of teams. Not many teams actually go undefeated. A lot of teams lose a game or two down the line. They lose a game they're not supposed to lose. I mean, the Kansas game for them was a pretty bad one. Nebraska was a pretty bad one. But you know, I'm looking at it and I'm like, did they improve? Yeah, they exceeded expectations. But also, if we look at that Baylor game when they throw the Hail Mary at the end of the game in the rain, like that game right there, I don't know. They were one play away from having another loss on their schedule. You know, like, so part of me is like, yeah, they exceeded expectations, but part of me is like, oh, well, they also were one play away from having another loss, and like that could have derailed some things right there too. So I don't know. They're kind of an interesting team for me, but I am happy for them for what they've accomplished. And I do think, you know, shout out to Dion for getting them insurance policies. That report just came out this week that he got them some insurance policies so that if they play in the game and get hurt, they're taken care of financially on that front, which is a pretty cool thing that he got taken care of. I don't think a lot of teams really, not many programs do that, which is if players actually knew that and could take advantage of that and get insurance policies out for themselves, then you might see more people playing in bowl games rather than, you know, tapping out and getting ready for the draft. So, okay. First round of the college football playoff. All right. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that happened at the end of the regular season. Ohio State lays an egg against Michigan. So they get put into, they don't even make the Big Ten championship. Therefore, they're hosting a first round game against Tennessee. Then you've got Penn State and SMU. And you've got these games that just, I mean, they seemed exciting, but man, they did not really, the fireworks were not necessarily there. Indiana, Notre Dame, just, it was a rough week for some of those teams. Let's start with Indiana, Notre Dame. Okay. They're 3 hours away from each other, right up the road in Indiana to go to South Bend from Bloomington. And I mean, I felt like it was the most atrocious offensive performance I've ever seen from a football program. And it just was frustrating to watch. I thought they absolutely got dominated. The defense held strong, but they could not move the ball. It's like, and then it was like watching Ohio State play Michigan. It's like there's no creativity in the play calling. Do you think that was more Notre Dame coming out to play and ready to be excited and playing in South Bend in front of their fans, or was that Indiana probably not deserving to be there?
It segues perfectly from what you said about Colorado to now the first round of the playoffs, because in retrospect, the whole first round was like, okay, do any of these teams deserve to actually be here? Like Indiana, like you said, one of the worst offenses that we've seen. And Notre Dame, I give them credit where it's due. Their defense has just been that locked down. They're a top 3 rush defense. They've been like that all season long. And when they're able to run the way they have with Jeremiah Love and Riley Leonard, it's just so hard to stop. And the score says otherwise, right? 27-17. They had, 3 points going into the final 4 minutes of that game? Like that was not actually what it was supposed to be. But then you look at all the other games, every team covered their spread. So it wasn't like we were surprised, or at least me personally. I saw people like telling me, oh, watch out for Indiana. Don't be surprised. I'm like, Notre Dame's going to wipe the floor with them. Like, are we actually trying to make a competitive argument for teams like Indiana, SMU, Tennessee, or Clemson to go far in this playoffs? It's so difficult for me to say.
That's a good point, man. Like, I mean, the spreads were there for a reason. And, it's just funny. Now everyone's talking about it. They're all, should we change the playoff to 8 teams? And how do we do, and now they're trying to figure everything out for what they're going to do next year. I think people forget, Mike, that every year, almost every single year since the college football playoffs started in 2014, that 2014 season, there's literally been a blowout, because there's a big difference between elite teams and great teams. And then there's a massive difference between great and good. And like, usually every year there's 1 or 2 elite teams. And then, and those are the 1-2 seeds in the bracket, typically speaking. Then you have a 3-4 that are great teams, but sometimes there's a gap difference. And we've seen blowouts in the 4-team playoff. We've seen them there. So what do we expect? Like, did we expect the 12 team to be any better? No. And people just got excited about the concept of it, but you're right. Like, the spreads were there for a reason, and teams covered their spreads. Like, it's what was expected, technically speaking,
One of the craziest things, I don't know to tell you, but like for looking at the first round, or just like the 12-team playoff in general, it's like you said, do we go back to 8? Do we go to 14? It's not March Madness. It's not. I would love to say any given Saturday, but like you said, there's teams that clearly outrank where they're supposed to be. Like Ohio State, I didn't expect them to kind of blow out Tennessee, but that's kind of how it is when you have those 4 teams that kind of are outliers, and then your teams that slide in the playoffs. So it's like, as much as I want to see the more teams, it's almost better if you kind of concide it down to like 6 to 8 teams. I think would be perfect.
I'm with you on that. I think, I don't know if they're going to go that route, but I think that makes more sense. But again, you're going to get frustration everywhere. We'll talk about Ohio State in a second, obviously, because that Tennessee game was very interesting. And I have a couple things to say about the Buckeyes and how they play. But since we were talking about Notre Dame and Indiana, Notre Dame will go on to play Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. It's a good matchup, though. See, here's the deal. Here's the thing, Mike. I'm kind of excited about this because Georgia's not with Carson Beck, except I think Carson Beck's overrated anyway. They might be in better shape with Stockton at quarterback. But then again, now teams have film on him. Like, he came out and he played well in the SEC championship, but nobody has film on him. Now they have film on him, and it's a whole different ballgame. It's just how it works when you get a backup. So I guess it's kind of like one of those toss-ups, but I actually am excited to see this. Do you think Notre Dame stands a chance, or you think Georgia steamrolls them?
I don't think there's a chance Georgia should steam, just because with the new quarterback in Stockton, it's like, is their offense really going to go out and show out? No, for me, I look at it, I think it's a battle of the trenches. It's like both these teams have great defenses. It's going to be a matter of who makes less mistakes at the end of the day, and defense wins championship. That's what it comes down to. And I have Notre Dame just edging out Georgia, but that whole side of the bracket is kind of skewed now that Beck's done. But like you said, Stockton could make a name for himself. So it's so difficult to really pick a team to edge it out, but it's going to be a close one, probably either field goal, 1-score game at least.
Wow. Yeah. See, I'm hoping it's going to be a battle. I think Notre Dame's playing really good football, but I think everybody's kind of waiting to see if they actually can win a big game, right? Like, what are they going to do when the spotlight's on? Because that Indiana game was not a big game. It was cool for the history of like the college football playoff, but that was not a big game yet. So curious to see how they match up. I don't know either. I actually think it will be a battle. I think Notre Dame's got a chance. It just really depends on how that quarterback play comes out. Like, I mean, you got the one thing with Beck that you had is just experience and understanding big moments and stuff and not getting rattled. not saying that Stockton's not able to do it. He's capable. He's a quarterback at that level for a reason. But, there's something to be said when you're used to that type of moment. Let's look over at the first game between Penn State and SMU. Looking at the first round game there, Penn State, Happy Valley, just absolute, like, SMU squeaks in after losing a tight game to Clemson in the ACC championship, right? So, like, everyone was kind of watching, like, they're exciting. They were kind of the feel-good story. Maybe they'll find a way to upset them. Man, I felt like they were similar to Indiana, man. They couldn't move the ball. The quarterback was completely rattled. Talking about quarterbacks in big-time moments, like, those are the types of things that you got to get, like, the pressure hits you and the momentum shifts. Can you snap out of it quicker? He could not. I don't know, man. What did you think of that Penn State game?
From as like a fan perspective, I think you always want to root for the underdog story. Like SMU almost beat Clemson big time. And then like, I'm like, yeah, they'll beat Penn State. In my analytical brain, there was not a chance that SMU kind of stood a chance. And I didn't expect like a 38-10 blowout, but wow, Penn State just ran away with it. And kind of like saying, hey, we can play good teams, but like SMU, 11th seed, just kind of sneaking in, like you said. It was a tough game to watch. And if that's how these playoffs are going to be, obviously now we're in the quarterfinals, so it should be more football that's engaging, I believe. Now, Boise State getting a bye, we'll get to that in a second. But the game overall was ugly.
That was ugly. Now, to that point, too, so Penn State has put up 30+ in 2 straight games, one against Oregon in the Big Ten championship. And I was of the opinion, dude, like I cannot stand Penn State's offense. I thought it was so boring all year. Like there's times where I watch them, I'm like, gosh, it's like they're so boring to watch sometimes. But then they started rolling near the end of the season. And even in that Big Ten championship, I thought they were going to get blown out. They were starting to lose momentum. And then they fired back. And then I was like, oh, they made it a game against Oregon. They actually like made it into a game, which I was not expecting. I think some teams are catching up to Oregon a little bit, but they're still undefeated for a reason. That's where I'm impressed with Penn State is they're kind of rolling at the right time. They kept that going right. They took a loss in the Big Ten championship, but they rolled that right into the first round game, just kept it going, which gets me to the next game, Boise State versus Penn State. I know when we were chatting before, you were like, nah, Boise State doesn't deserve a bye. Mountain West champions, they won the championship. They're group of 5. They get a bye in the first round. Now Penn State, having lost the Big Ten championship, has a route against SMU and then a group of 5 team in the quarterfinals in Arizona. Talk about this matchup, Mike, and tell us how you really feel, Mike. Let's go. This is where you open up. Let's open it up.
Okay. I think back to the last show that we did, and you asked me, you were like, who do you think's the odd team out? The team that you may not believe in, and I said Penn State, and now it looks really dumb because they might just go all the way with the way that side of the bracket looks. They play SMU, they play Boise State, then they play the winner of Notre Dame, Georgia. So that's basically kind of a trip for them. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but this is going to be a good game. I broke it down when I did my bracket. I'm like, okay, Boise, Penn State. If they stop Genty, it's over, I think. And even if they don't stop Genty, which I don't think they will, probably we could see a 200+ day from Genty. I wouldn't be surprised. But at the same time, Penn State might just edge him out by a touchdown at the end of the day. And Boise probably didn't deserve the bye, but the way Genty has kind of willed that team to victory all year, I'd love to see what they got to do. But when it comes down to it, Penn State's just that better team.
I'm with you on that. I'm intrigued by this matchup for the sole. Well, I was originally because I thought Penn State's offense sucked. Then all of a sudden they start clicking the last couple of weeks of the season. So now I'm like, uh-oh. Like there's a whole different ball game when when Aller's playing well, he's running, he's throwing, like he can actually move. They get Warren involved. Like they're a problem for some teams. And I was with you too. I had a clip of our discussion on the last podcast about Penn State. We were talking about the SEC schools that could potentially beat them in that whole conversation. Dude, we got some flack for that on my YouTube channel. I was like, this is great. That's just one of those things. That's why we play the game, right? But they're rolling at the right time. They get a break with the bracket, in my opinion. Like you said, I'm of that same opinion. It's like, man, they got SMU and then Boise State, and then if they win that, they get Notre Dame. I mean, it's not as hard as Oregon, I would say. So, looking at it though, Boise State's strength is their run game, obviously. And Their weakness is their pass defense. Now their run defense is pretty solid. Their front seven is actually incredible, and their pass rush is pretty good too. But their corners cannot hang with elite receivers at all. Like, I mean, they've gotten better. Boise State's corners have gotten better last 2 weeks of the last 2 games. They actually turned their heads when the ball was in the air so they wouldn't get flagged. But I mean, that was a problem all year. They couldn't turn around, couldn't catch the ball. Then they're getting PIs or getting burned. But the problem is, man, I don't know. Penn State's defensive line is a strength for them, and Boise State's interior running game is their strength. And I think it's going to come down to what schemes they have. Here's the one thing I think Boise State has going for them, Mike. Dirk Cutter, offensive coordinator for Boise State. I think people forget that. I mean, the dude coached the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He was with the Falcons. I mean, the guy's got NFL experience. That's why they're rolling. That's why he stayed there for another year, because he knows how to get the offense rolling. He maximizes what they have, because they're pretty limited as far as at the quarterback position. So I do think that he'll come up with a good scheme to kind of neutralize Penn State and probably have some ball control there too. But man, I have a hard time believing that Boise State's going to win a shootout against Penn State. And if Penn State's offense keeps rolling, I could see that being a 15-point game easy with Penn State moving on to the next round. So it's going to be an intriguing matchup, mainly just because I'm a Boise State alum and they're playing in the Fiesta Bowl. That is basically Boise State's favorite bowl game to be in. I've been to every one of them besides the TCU game. I love going there. The Boise State fan base is going to be there. And if I wasn't going to the Rose Bowl, I'd be heading down to Arizona for that one. So it's going to be packed, mainly Boise State fans. I think it'll be the majority of them. So it'll almost be a home game for BSU probably. I still don't think they match. At the end of the day, you got to play the game on the field, and I think Penn State wins it. I don't think the Cinderella story is going to work for Boise State no more on this one. So we look over at the other games in here. So let's take a look at Ohio State, Tennessee. Okay, dude. Ohio State, absolutely atrocious against Michigan. There's no excuses there. They just looked awful. Didn't know how to make a play call. Chip Kelly forgot how to do anything from an offensive coordinator standpoint. Team just didn't execute. They lose at home against Michigan. Terrible way to go out. They had a couple of weeks off. No one knew what was going to happen with Ohio State. We were trying to figure, should they fire Ryan Day? There's all this stuff. The fan base is ballistic. They come out against Tennessee, and I was pretty excited for the game. There are a lot of people who were just like, whatever. They're going to get blown out again. There was fan bases that are they're just pessimistic. But they come out there, and, man, they just come out free, just ready to play, like nothing to lose. And that's when Ohio State's scary, is when they have nothing to lose. They play loose. They play the way they're supposed to. They get their athletes in space, and they absolutely just boat raced Tennessee. Going into that game, what were your thoughts? I mean, Tennessee was coming out, we're taking over Columbus. There was all this stuff. Like they had a good travel fan base. Like everybody was there, taking over Columbus downtown. A lot of reports, this, that, and the third. And then they laid an egg. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that game.
Yes, you look at, like you said, the Michigan game was rough. Ohio State coming into Tennessee game, I thought that it was going to be rough. Now, looking at the Ohio State-Michigan game, the rivalry, big time, it was a bad week. But they had nowhere to go but up. And that's like when you have such a bad game, it's like, okay, fresh mindset. We're first round of the playoffs. So Tennessee, you give them a little bit of a scare with the way that D-line's been playing all year with the most sacks and just the amount of firepower that they have. So I definitely was a little nervous. I didn't think there was a chance that they'd lose, but I figured maybe at worst case scenario, it'd come down to a field goal game. To be honest, I just didn't trust the Tennessee offense to keep up. Was I expecting a better fight? Yes. But 21-zip after the first quarter, that was just crazy. And I just was sitting there. I was like, wow, Ohio State came to play. And that's what it ended up being, is a good old-fashioned whooping.
Man, and here's the thing about that game that's interesting, Mike, is like, it was a pretty close game, you know what I mean? Like at halftime. So Tennessee gained the momentum, as 21-10 at halftime, and they had the ball going in the second half, and that's why everyone was kind of like, and then it was as soon as Ohio State made one stop in the second half, they kind of put their foot on the gas again. This is what I looking at them. I'm trying to be unbiased. Obviously, I'm a fan of the Buckeyes, but like, that is a roster that is elite. They lost by 1 to Oregon on the road in a heavyweight battle. They lost by 3 points. They lost 2 games by combined 4 points this year. One of them was to a rival. Yes, Michigan sucks, but like, they're a rival. BYU almost lost to Utah. I mean, like, teams lose to their rivals all the time. There's always back and forth battles all the time. Georgia almost lost to Georgia Tech. No one's talking about that. I'm like, dude, That stuff, it happens against rivals. So to me, I was just like, man, if they can like get past that inside the locker room and just figure it out, they're still nasty. And I actually was pretty excited about it. I'm not surprised at all because that's the Ohio State team that they have. They've got NFL caliber talent across the board, and that's what you're going to see. I mean, so going into the next game, the Rose Bowl, which is interesting because that's Ohio State's like, that's one of their favorite bowl games to play. And, as fan base travels well down to Pasadena, California, warm weather most of the time, at least decent weather. Going into play Oregon in a rematch. And Oregon, even undefeated, winning the Big Ten, is underdogs. Vegas has Ohio State currently as a favorite. A favorite. So I want to see what the line is right now. I'm going to Google that. Ohio State, Oregon, Rose Bowl line. Let me see what it is. It was at 2.5. I wanted to say. Let's see. Buckeyes are a negative minus 130. Yep. Ducks are a plus 110, 2.5 point favorite. Yes, they got Ohio State as a 2.5 point favorite over Oregon going into the Rose Bowl. I'm like, oh boy, is this just recency bias because they saw that one game, or are they really putting together a full slate of work and they're seeing what Ohio State's done outside of just that Michigan game and actually seeing what can happen? I don't know. What are we thinking, Mike, going into the Rose Bowl? Rematch against Oregon, big time, heavy hitters. Most thought this could potentially be a national championship game or at least a semifinal game. I'm curious what your thoughts are, man.
I actually didn't know that Ohio State was favored, but that's crazy. I mean, yeah, it was going to be a pick 'em. I figured it'd be a 2.5 point spread regardless, but I don't know. Coming into the first round of the playoffs, I feel like everyone was trashing Ohio State, like you said, with the Michigan game. And I don't think anyone believed in them. I don't think anybody still does, but the public is saying otherwise. Just for, I guess, the people I've been around, it's like Ohio State's frauds or all this crazy stuff. But the thing is with Oregon, yes, they're the number one team in the country. They're the number one team for a reason because of how dominant that offense is. But if they make one mistake, the game's over. That defense cannot stop anyone. They just can't. And I don't want to be like that, but like, it's just been that way all season long. They've been in those one-score games with either, Boise. You look back at the Washington game, or I'm not sure if that was the game, but there was a game.
Idaho close, first game of the season.
Idaho, there was a bunch. There was a bunch. But this is the thing. Can Ohio State's offense show up like they did against Tennessee? That's the only question mark. Can you make Dillon Gabriel make one mistake and throw that bad pick towards the end of the game? That's what it's going to come down to. This is going to be a shootout, and it's going to come down to what defense can make a stop. And I don't trust Oregon's defense the entire season. They've showed time and time again that teams are just going to keep it close like Penn State did. So,
man, it's an interesting take. And here's the thing, Mike, I'm going back. I'm trying to talk to people about this because like, oh no, Oregon's going to steamroll them, which I could see. Like, it's one of those things where you can see, like, depending on who shows up, which Ohio State shows up. I mean, the majority of the season, Ohio State showed up. They did not show up against Michigan. That's it. I mean, and it's frustrating as a fan. It's like the one game you want them to show up. But other than that, they showed up all year. So that's where I'm like, guys, like, just give it a second. But in that game against Oregon, and I was down there in Autzen Stadium, a couple of things happened. One, a crazy strip fumble with oh my gosh, I'm trying to think. Running back. Oh my heck.
Peoples?
No, dude, why can't I think of his freaking name? Anyway, our running back, Judkins, holy cow. Our running back gets stripped while he's like in the backfield, just holding onto the ball, and they just pulled it out of his hands on the tackle. That was a crazy one, resulted in points. If anybody remembers, on the kickoff, there was a line drive at the front line of the guy on one of the kickoffs where Oregon recovered that. It hit the dude straight up, bounced right off of him, right back to the Oregon guy on a kickoff. That changed everything as well, too. So there were a lot of things that happened. And like you said, if you can maybe limit those if you're Ohio State, or, make Gabriel make a mistake, you're right in that game and you could potentially, close it out. But the thing is Oregon's undefeated for a reason. It's not easy to be undefeated. Nobody else can do it. Like, everyone else everyone loses something, right? Like, it seems like that anyway. They found ways to win. I don't know what's going to happen here. I want to see my Buckeyes win. I think they win a close one. That's just me being optimistic. Let's go over to Texas, dude. Texas Clemson. I was actually excited for this game just simply because I was like, I wanted to see the quarterback battle. I thought Clemson looked good on offense. They were kind of rolling a little bit. Even when they were down, they were still moving the ball pretty well. But Texas, high-powered, at home, did their thing. And now they're going to go into that second-round matchup against Arizona State. But what are your thoughts on Texas, man? Are they frauds or are they for real, dude?
I don't know. I had Texas going to this is the game after is what I'm kind of worried about. Is Arizona State, all that, which maybe they go on a run. That's one of the only teams that I think they got to buy. Nobody expecting them to do anything. But back to the Clemson game. I was expecting Texas to be in the game. Now, when they win by only 14, it gives you a question mark. They kind of let Clemson back in that game. It was a one-score game, but they ended up running away with it quite literally. Both their running backs had over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. It was crazy. Both Jaden Blue and Windsor went crazy. So can they do that against every team? Probably not. Is Ewers going to throw for 300 plus? I mean, time will kind of tell, but it's such a difficult task. And when it was a one-score game, I was so nervous. I was like, is Clemson actually going to pull it off? Because Klubnik played well the whole game through. He only made, I think 1 or 2 mistakes. He threw that pick. But 300-plus yards, 3 touchdowns, and a one-score game, and then defense can't stop him.
Yeah, man. Texas is so funny because to me, it's not their pass game. It's not their pass game. It's their run game. And we look at their quarterbacks and we always think, oh, their quarterbacks are so elite. Well, sure, they're capable, but man, it's their running game that gets people, And yeah, here's the thing with Texas. They're in a good spot simply because logistically, I mean, they're going to the Peach Bowl. They're closer than Arizona State. Hopefully Arizona State's fan base travels, but Texas is going to bring the fans. And then after that, I believe they go to the Cotton Bowl if they win, which is basically their own backyard. So regardless if it's Ohio State or Oregon, they're going to be playing another home game. So they're going to have fans. Probably the majority of them will be at both of those games. How do you think they stand? My question is this: can they stop the running attack of Arizona State and the Cinderella feel good story of Arizona State? Because watching Arizona State, they're one of those teams too. I mean, they're a feel good story. It's cool. They've exceeded expectations. They've executed at a high level in the games that they were supposed to win. They came out there and they won the games they needed to win. And then they've earned their spot there. But I don't know. I want to see Cam just see if he can put up 150 to 200 on Texas defense. I don't know. But Texas, here's the thing, Mike. I'm not fully sold on Texas because they haven't played anybody. The team that they played, which was Georgia, they couldn't get past them, and that they haven't really played anybody big to me where they've proven themselves either. Are they good? Sure, they deserve to be there, but it's just I don't know what to expect going into this game. I think Texas still wins by 2 touchdowns, but I am curious to see. I'm curious to see if they can stop the run. I want to see if they can stop the run.
Snadabu's been unreal this season. Some who I know, friends of mine, he could have been a Heisman candidate. I'm like, maybe. But Scadabu's been unreal. And you talk about Texas really not playing anyone. Arizona State, I mean, they really haven't played anyone either. So it's yes, they're going to run all over the field. And like you said, I don't know about 2 touchdowns, but for what Arizona State has played for this season, and they blew Iowa State out of the water in that Big 12 championship. So it's just crazy all around. And when you look at it, I think it should come down to a 1-score game just because of how dominant their run game is. Scadabu putting up 170 plus. I could very well see that guy going crazy. But Texas has been that team where it's they're either on or they're off. They're hot or they're cold. And even against Clemson, their defense got to get it together. You cannot let them back in the game. It reminded me of the SMU game where Clemson kind of throttled off the gas in the second half, and then all of a sudden here comes SMU. But this is a totally different thing with Texas. It's I don't know. Their defense has been pretty good all season. Now, can they figure it out in the playoffs?
Dude, that's what makes it so exciting. So if we're looking at it, who is going to be in the semifinals, Mike? Who's going to be in the semifinals? Let's start Texas, Arizona State, and then Oregon, Ohio State. Who's the 2 that make it to the semis on that side of the bracket?
We'll start with Texas, Arizona State. I really think it's a coin flip. It's so tough because is Texas all that? And I could be totally wrong. They could come out and wipe the floor with Arizona State, but Arizona State off a bye. They got time. They rest. Texas, a kind of, I think, a tough one, even though it was a 2-score game. It was a 1-score game at one point. Going in that game, Texas wins. But by how much is the question? It could be a field goal. It could be 7. It could be 20 plus. But I think they are the better team. They had the experience. They should get the job done. Can they stop the run is the other question. We'll find out. But Texas should edge it out. I don't know by how much, like I said, but that's my thoughts. Ohio State, Oregon kind of took a shot at Oregon, but the defense is not enough for me to say that they can go all the way. Defense wins championships. I'm a firm believer in that. And Ohio State gave them trouble. And I say that lightly because Gabriel had 340 yards and made them look crazy. And the way he can run it, that guy can do anything. So he can make you a fool pretty much at any time, no matter how great your defense is. And that's just how college football goes. You have these crazy offenses against these crazy defenses. And again, it's going to be a shootout. It's going to come down to who has the ball last, to be completely honest. And Ohio State had it. The last game they played, it was field goal game. And then they had that controversy with the slide. And then the game in Michigan, Ryan Day screaming for his head. I am a firm believer if Ohio State wins this game, they're going to go to the championship just because I don't believe in Texas. But that's my thoughts on the quarterfinal side of who's going to make it to the semifinal in the Cotton Bowl.
It's interesting. Before we go to the other side of the bracket to just get our final takes on that, I agree with both of those. So I do think it's going to be Texas, Ohio State going into the semis. A fun fact, I think Texas has more talent, and I know that sounds terrible, but I do think they have more talent. I don't know if it's going to be a blowout, but again, we were talking about the 12-team playoff, and there's blowouts too. When there was a 4-team playoff, there was blowouts in the first round. This is still down to 8, right? So I expect there to be some games that may not be within a touchdown. I think that Texas wins by more than 10. But that's just me. I'm not fully sold on them either. It's a toss up to me, but that doesn't mean I don't think they can win by almost 2 touchdowns or more. I think they have better athletes, and I know it's going to sound crazy. People are going to be pissed. It is what it is. Ohio State, fun fact on them. I was trying to dive into this matchup. I think out of any team in the country, I think they match up pretty well with Oregon, but again, we've gone through that. The fun fact is, though, since the Oregon game, Ohio State has not given up a pass touchdown. I didn't realize that, but that was their game where they kept getting burned on 3rd and longs for touchdowns. And I feel like they've figured out something in their pass defense, which is good. Doesn't mean they're not going to get scored on, though. I think that they're going to get some pass touchdowns on them in this game, but I just think that they have improved drastically on that front. Because even in the Michigan game, I mean, they gave 13 points. Not like they were giving up a ton of points. It's just they couldn't score. So I think Ohio State gets through that too. I think it's Texas, Ohio State going into the Cotton Bowl, but that one scares me simply because, like I said, Texas will be in a home game basically at AT&T Stadium on that one, to my understanding. So going on the other side of the bracket, Notre Dame, Georgia, and then Boise State, Penn State. Who's in the semis?
Oh boy. We'll start with Notre Dame, Georgia, battle of the trenches. Let's be honest. Who's going to run the ball better, Jeremiah Love or Carson Beck and Trevor Etienne? I don't know. To be honest, the Georgia offense scares me. Although, I don't know why I just said Carson Beck, but he's not there. Gunnar Stockton. Yeah, that's going to be the game. It's a matter of, I think Notre Dame's run game and that offense is so electric, and it's so much more than what Georgia stood for. It's a matter of, can they stop them? Because if you have Riley Leonard drop back and try and throw a pass, we've seen that story, and it hasn't worked. They have to keep the ball on the ground, and they have to move into the semifinals. I really do believe that Georgia's going to get knocked off, and I think people are saying that they're going to win, and I wouldn't be surprised. But at the same time, without Beck, I feel like that off. And Beck's, like you said, he's not the craziest. I agree, he's overrated as well. But I still feel like the veteran presence is still something you need, especially in the playoffs. And I got Notre Dame in this one. So Notre Dame, Penn State, I think we talked about it before. But Boise State, they're going to keep it close for what they are, I don't think they're worth a buy. But the way the season goes, the way the picture of the bracket goes, the pieces are fitting well for Penn State. We'll just say that. But yeah, Penn State, Notre Dame, that's going to be the side of the bracket. And I don't think it's the two best teams there, but because the bracket's so big, it's like it's so tough to put all these teams into that situation. Georgia's unfortunately probably going to get knocked off. I don't think they make a run in the championship, but again, they could upset if that is an upset.
It is one of those things. You play the game, but I actually agree on those two. So I think we're on the same. Our bracket's the same right now as far as who's making the semis. And when it gets to that point, if Penn State and Notre Dame actually do make it, that's an intriguing matchup to me. Very similar, like just old school mentality football, boring helmets that are just plain. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just kind of that. It's kind of a cool little traditional schools. Each one of them is very traditional, historic schools. And I think that'd be a fun matchup in the semis. I'm looking forward to it. Now, the last question I have for you, Mike, as we get ready, because I would love to do another show with you before the national championship. So after the semis are done and everything, we'll reconvene and see if we can't get a national championship special here. But the playoffs, let's just assume they're going to keep it at 12 teams, right? What are your takes on this? I've seen a couple different ideas, like example, after the first round, seeding them based on their seedings, right? So like 3-6, so it'd be Texas. How did it all work out? I can't even remember. I saw like taking it like 1 versus 8, 2 versus 7, 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5, a similar like and reseeding them that way based on their rankings, rather than putting them in a bracket, so to speak, like on a side that way you would get away from that whole Penn State getting that walkthrough, so to speak, cakewalk. I hate saying cakewalk, but it's kind of like they just have the easiest path, if you want to call it that. So, yep. I don't know. I kind of like that take. I don't think it's too crazy to think that would be something to do. It rewards the number one team in the country. It rewards the higher seeds for a reason. But if you could look at any improvements on a 12-team bracket, assuming they keep it the same, what would your improvements be?
You look at why they made the 12-team playoffs, and I was somebody who was for it. Especially with the 4 teams. I just feel like after the regular season, college football just kind of dies down for a couple weeks. We kind of wait for these games. And I love how they're trying to bring the March Madness style to it. Bring 12 teams, bring more teams. But at the end of the day, is that really what you want to do? And you look at, like you said, what if you have the 1 seed versus if they do expand the 14, 1-14, and they just do no buys. Now, football and basketball are 2 totally, completely different sports, so it's tough to actually say if you want to do that. But you can argue if Oregon's the 1st seed and they play SMU round 1, that's basically a buy in itself. So I don't know. I don't want to say too much, but I feel like keeping it to the top 8, maybe, okay, bumping out Boise State. It's kind of like what the committee did with where like wins doesn't matter. And Alabama was probably the better team than SMU and Clemson, but they didn't get in. So I don't know. I want to hear your side of this because the whole committee side you're against, and it's tough. But for me, I feel like 12 teams, we saw it in action. We were all blowouts. What are we going to expect moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, so here's the thought I have on that is if they keep it at 12 teams, I think you could still do a first round bye for the top 4. Now, how that gets panned out is a different story. I think you have to find a different way so that the Boise States and so forth, like yes. That's an argument in and of itself, but like the top 4 teams get the bye. I don't know how to explain that, but like I think that there should be 4 buys. Then you have 8 teams still playing, but it's after that first round. It's after even if there's blowouts, whatever, but it's after that first round, these quarterfinal matchups being seeded based on their seeding. So like it would be, I mean, I think they broke it down. I think Oregon would play, who was it? They would play, I'm trying to think of who was it was Texas, Ohio State. Mm-hmm. Who in the freak was it? I'm trying to think of who it all was, but yeah, basically it would go 1 versus 8. So whoever they would reseed them after. So those 4 teams that get past the first round, whoever's ranked higher, they put them in 5, 6, 7, 8 based on their rankings. And then 1 plays 8, 2 plays 7, 3 plays 6, 4 plays 5. That would put Texas, Ohio State this round because it'd be a 3-6 matchup. Texas being 3, Ohio State being 6, I believe, or it's the other way around. I can't remember off the top of my head. But anyway, that's how they had it broken down. I actually love that because it still rewards teams for having a bye. I think you have to figure out who actually gets the buys, and then it seeds them properly to where you're not getting a Penn State playing against SMU and Boise State. Penn State wouldn't have had that. So I don't know. I thought that was an interesting take on it, assuming they keep it at 12 teams. I don't see them jumping it down because of how much money is involved in this. I think there's so much money flowing through college football right now because of the playoff, like just astronomical amounts of money. So I don't see the committee like changing it. But I think there needs to be change on like at least but here's the problem, Mike. Every year we talk about this. Like, is the strength of schedule there, or do you value wins? Like, I mean, Alabama lost 3 games and they weren't a conference champion. I mean, it's hard for me to say. Like, I think they could have competed better than SMU, but like at some point, you got to win games. Like, otherwise, just I don't know. I don't know how else to say it either there. But next year, what's going to happen? Just watch. Say they keep the same. It's going to be the exact opposite than this year. So there will be no SMUs in there. They'll take these SEC guys that have 3 losses because they had a stronger strength of schedule. They'll put them in, and then that won't work. And so then they'll they'll flip it the next year. They're never like able to just find a common ground. It's always one side or the other side, and they just wish-wash it over. And that's what it's a little frustrating when you put the human element into it. But I don't know, man. I'm excited for this year. I'm excited to see how it pans out, but I definitely think changes need to be made. So,
who was your championship pick? If we ended on that.
I think, assume if Ohio State gets past Oregon, so I'm going to keep my pick there. I think Ohio State gets to the national championship, and I could see it being an Ohio State Notre Dame national championship.
Ooh, okay.
I think that's what happens is Ohio State Notre Dame national championship. What
See,
about you, man?
I'm looking Big Ten, Ohio State, Penn State. Can the little brother go all the way? I don't know. It's going to be tough to pull off, but I would love to see that rematch just because of all the Penn State fans kind of talking that team up. And like you said, both Ohio State and Penn State are getting hot at the right time. And I think that Notre Dame Penn State game is going to be the deciding factor, but both those teams look really good. And to see what could be, I think, like they put all the right teams in, and that's what happens when you have a 12 team. The more teams, I think it shows who's obviously pulling away with the right length in terms of like you got strength of schedule, you got dominant teams, but all the teams that should be in terms of top 6, top 8 should be there. So that's kind of my pick. I don't know who wins, but Ohio State, Penn State. I'd love to see Penn State upset your team, but I know how you feel about it.
Yo, dude, though, that's funny, Mike, because we went from Penn State's like the one that we could see get upset. Now they're going to make
not an easy road. It makes sense.
No, I love it though, and honestly, it would be so ironic because both fan bases get so mad at their coaches. If it'd be Ryan Day, like dude, if Franklin, and they're so mad about can't win the big game type of deal. They're very similar in that regard.
The funniest thing is if Penn State wins the championship and we said how it's going to go, they will still have not beat a top 5 team to win a championship. And that's their toughest thing is they can't beat the top 5 opponent. And they have to play one technically.
That's hilarious, dude. Wouldn't that be a story too? Oh my gosh. That's so funny. Yeah, man. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes. Maybe we're completely wrong. Maybe we're spot on, but, We'll jump back on here in just a couple of weeks and do a little pregame type of recap national championship show. Okay. But yeah, Mike, I appreciate you joining me, man, and being willing to do this during the Christmas break. But get ready for some good football, man. I'll be chatting with you soon. All right, brother?
It was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me, Shane.
Heck yeah. For all those who are listening, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We'll be coming to you next week with another interview. Take care. Guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of my show. Now, if you could go and do me a favor, head over to iTunes, give me 5 stars, and leave me a review, it would be greatly appreciated. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your support.